It's day 18 of the Israel-Hamas war, and the spillover talk is getting real. Israel's biggest ally, the United States, is under attack. The Americans have soldiers and bases all over West Asia. Some of them have been targeted. The latest incident was on Monday. 2 drones tried to hit U.S. forces in southern Syria. Both were shot down. It was the 5th such attack in 1 week. So clearly there is a pattern. And these attacks have happened in 2 countries. Syria, where the U.S. has 900 soldiers, and Iraq, where they have 2,500 soldiers. But the damages have been limited. Only minor injuries so far, not even a single death. That does not mean that Washington is not worried about what's happening. On Monday, President Joe Biden was speaking at an event on the U.S. economy. Look at what happened midway.
I apologize. I have to go to the Situation Room with another issue I have to deal with. But thank you, thank you, thank you.
He left. Joe Biden rushed to the White House Situation Room. Now, this is significant. The Situation Room is like the crisis center. When things go wrong, American presidents go there for briefings, for meetings, and sometimes just to monitor. They go to the Situation Room. So why did Joe Biden go? Well, there is no official explanation from the White House, but soon news of the drone attack emerged. So chances are it was that. The U.S. is blaming Iranian proxies for these attacks. They've also threatened to hit back. But Tehran says, don't blame us. They've accused Biden instead of escalating Israel's Gaza offensive.
We know that Iran is closely monitoring these events and in some cases actively facilitating these attacks and spurring on others who may want to exploit the conflict for their own good or for that of Iran. We know Iran's goal is to maintain some level of deniability here, but we're not going to allow them to do that. We also are not going to allow any threat to our interest in the region to go unchallenged.
Over the past 2 weeks, America has proved that it is intensifying and expanding the war in Gaza, West Bank, and against Palestinian women, children, and civilians by sending thousands of arms shipments and showing full-fledged support to the Zionist regime. Therefore, I'd like to address to Mr. Biden from here, Mr. Biden, stop hypocrisy.
A blame game, basically. The U.S. says Iran is expanding the war. Iran says the Americans are doing it. But is anyone talking about peace? Washington says it's not the right time. Hamas is still holding hostages in Gazan territory, and the U.S. says they must release them first. Only then can a ceasefire be discussed. But will Hamas agree to that? It's certainly their best option because Israel's airstrikes are only getting worse. They struck 400 targets in the last 24 hours. 400 targets. The death toll is more than 5,100 in Gaza. Plus food, water and electricity are running out, even in hospitals. Doctors say hospital generators will stop working in 48 hours. And if that happens, it will be a disaster. No ventilators, no incubators, not even lights to perform surgeries. In fact, some hospitals are rationing painkillers like morphine. They're operating on patients without them. You can imagine what it's like. Doctors have accused world powers of signing a death warrant for northern Gaza. Listen to this.
If the hospital is not provided with the necessary fuel for the generators, we are issuing a death sentence, not a natural death. The execution is in the hands of the free world, human rights organizations and the United Nations. Everyone is guilty, and they are all guilty if they do not supply the hospital with fuel. You are signing a death warrant for the northern Gaza Strip and the patients of Gaza.
I'm sure Hamas knows all of this. So the U.S. has thrown them a lifeline here. Release the hostages and then we can talk. It's not a guaranteed ceasefire, but it's the next best thing. And the Hamas realizes this. Reports say they've offered to release 50 hostages. On one condition, though. Israel must allow fuel into Gaza. So fuel for 50 hostages. The talks apparently hit a snag on Monday. Israel said fuel will be allowed only if all the hostages are freed. Not just 50, all of them. We've seen some progress on that front. On Monday, Hamas released 2 hostages from Gaza, both elderly women. One is 79 years old, the other is 85 years old. It takes a special kind of brutality to kidnap such helpless civilians, 79 and 85. Israel says both women are now doing fine. Their husbands, though, are still with Hamas. One of them shared the story of their capture.
My mom is saying that she was taken on the back of a motorbike with her body, with her legs on one side and her heart on another side. That she was taken through the plowed fields with a man in front on one side and a man behind her, and that while she was being taken, she was hit by sticks by Shabab. Yeah, Shabab people. Until they reached the tunnel. There they walked for a few kilometers on the wet ground. There are a huge network of tunnels underneath. It looks like a spider web.
The Hamas still holds around 200 people. Releasing them for a ceasefire is their best bet. Western countries will also be hoping for that. But the question is, will Israel agree? It's a tough moment for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He faces two kinds of pressure. One is external. Even Israel's allies are worried about the rising civilian casualties. They know the numbers will increase if Gaza is invaded, if Israel carries out the ground invasion. We've seen many Western leaders travel to Israel in the past few days. All of them have raised this concern. Today was Emmanuel Macron's turn, the French president. He held talks with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli president. He offered his full support to Israel, but there was a gentle reminder too. Listen in.
La lutte doit être sans merci.
The fight must be merciless, but not without rules, because we are democracies which fight against terrorists, democracies which therefore respect the laws of war and ensure humanitarian access, democracies which do not target civilians of Gaza or anywhere. Respect for the population requires, in this case, to allow access to aid, to restore electricity for hospitals, for the sick and the injured, without allowing this electricity to be used to wage war.
De rétablir, et nous en avons longuement parlé très en détail.
That's the external pressure. The second kind of pressure is at home. Many Israelis want Netanyahu to resign, to take responsibility for the Hamas attack on October 7th. A recent poll, in fact, found that 80% of Israelis blame Netanyahu for what happened. And that includes his ministers. Reports say 3 of them are planning to resign. 3 Israeli ministers are planning to resign. It's their way of protesting against the prime minister. It's their way of saying, you must resign too. Former government officials have said the same, like ex-Prime Minister Ehud Barak and former IDF chief Dan Halutz. Despite this, Netanyahu hangs on. Forget the resignation, he's not even apologized. His cabinet ministers have apologized. The defense chiefs have also apologized. Even the intelligence heads have said sorry. It's just Netanyahu who's not. So the Gaza invasion is politically important for him. Maybe the only way to redeem himself. But history shows us that such decisions should never be political. They must be rooted in strategy and logic. If not, they will backfire. Joe Biden warned Netanyahu about this. He asked Israel to not make America's mistakes after 9/11. But as things stand, an invasion is more likely because Biden and company do not keep Netanyahu in power. The people of Israel do.